Welcome, everyone. Topic today of this jam session is AI and analytics success is all about architecture. Architecture. Why? Why do we care about that? Why focus on that? Well, we all know why. You can't build great apps if you don't have great architecture. And we absolutely have to have great AI apps and great analytic apps. Otherwise, your business, frankly, isn't going to succeed. It's pretty straightforward nowadays. I mean, the technology opportunity to differentiate and continue to evolve and serve your customers, drive down your costs, meet compliance needs. It's really analytics, AI. Those are such huge enablers. And that's why we're going to focus today on the architectures that are required in order to get that success and build those great apps. A lens I wanted to use on today is kind of, maybe it's funky. I don't know. There's a couple of shows I love on streaming: Engineering Marvels and Engineering Disasters. And in Engineering Marvels, you see these fabulous bridges and roads and buildings that get created and all of the wonderful design and engineering and architecture that goes into it. And I really think about it, the fabulous engineering was overcome in order to achieve that. Whereas engineering disasters, they show the dam collapsing, bridge falling, a building going over, and you just go, oh my gosh, how did that happen? What did they fail to consider? What errors of omission or errors of commission did they make? Did they miss out on certain requirements? Did they do the math wrong? Faulty materials, mistaken calculations, who knows? Every show is a different effort, but I think the same thing happens in architectures. You forget something, or something changes, or you fail to consider anything. So we're going to try to use that thinking to evaluate, look at architectures. Can we make engineering marvel architectures and avoid engineering disaster architectures? And to do that, we've brought together a panel of experts. So welcome, gentlemen. I'll do some introductions. Let's start with a longtime friend and dare I say, drinking buddy, John Santaferraro, the CEO and head analyst at Ferraro Consulting. John, tell us about what you're doing these days. Just tell us about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, mostly working in the analytics space, working with vendors to help them better position their products, and working on the user side to help them find the best fit product. It's the wild, wild west out there, and it's difficult to figure out what is it that's going to fit my requirements. So having both of those hats on helps.
And what do you bring from your background that lets you do that?
30 years of experience in data analytics, AI. I've done a little bit of everything. A lot of time I spent on the vendor side as a product marketing guy, building products. I've done implementation. I built an AI or a analytics application for the $565 billion event industry when they didn't have one. And then I've worked as a chief analytics officer. I've done implementation, and for the last several years, I've been working as an industry analyst.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you on the panel and welcome. Roy, VP of Product Marketing at Upsolver. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Upsolver, and tell us about Upsolver. What is Upsolver?
Of course. So again, thanks for having me. So I lead the product team at Upsolver. Upsolver you can think of it as a lakehouse control center. Right. And we do three main things. The first one is we connect sources to Iceberg, right? So you can bring data from Postgres or, streams from Kafka, et cetera, into Iceberg. Second thing we do is we allow you to create Iceberg live tables. This is something that you just simply give us a piece of SQL, just some code, transformations, aggregations, cleanup, whatever you want. We ingest from the source and we write into an Iceberg table, continuously maintain that table for you. So we always have live, fresh tables. And then the third piece is we provide adaptive optimization. So something key in lake houses and in Iceberg in particular is how do you manage and maintain and optimize the data that's residing in your object store. So that's a capability that we've been building over 7+ years. Now we're bringing it to Iceberg. So we're bringing a lot of that knowledge and experience of managing data at scale to Iceberg. Before that, I was working at AWS. I was there for about 6 years in the analytics space, working on many services, Amazon EMR, AWS Glue, many of those. I worked with a lot of customers at AWS and also at Absolver to hands-on build architectures, design these architectures, actually implement them in the field, help customers test, debug issues. So spent a lot of times across small startups who just want to get up and running with a particular use case to large enterprises, conglomerates that are trying to stitch together, multiple business units, multiple companies across different continents. So kind of scale the gamut of tiny to very, very large, primarily around data architectures, but also around just basic cloud services, right? I want to move my database. I want to move my compute. So I got a lot of that experience as well. And then layering analytics and data and AI on top of that has kind of been the last, 7-8 years.
Perfect. I can't wait to hear some of your marvels and disasters stories. Andrew, over at Dremio, lead evangelist, developer advocate, a couple other roles over there too. Tell us about you and Dremio and what you do there.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm a developer advocate at Dremio, and Dremio is a great company. It's a data lakehouse provider where we have SQL query engine with federated acceleration, unified analytics across all your data sources, and lakehouse management. And there, my role really is enabling data analysts and data scientists to make the best use of their data wherever it lives.
Great. Well, as you can see, we've got a great team here, so let's dig in. First question, let's start at the business level. And what do you guys see out there as our business requirements that are stressing AI and analytic architectures today? So what are the business drivers that are requiring great architecture? And why don't we start with you, Andrew?
I think there's two competing interests that I see a lot. One is coming down from a lot of boards of please implement AI, like here's a budget, please build AI. And the second is coming from government regulations. We've got CCPA, we have GDPR. So these two don't necessarily conflict, but a lot of times if you don't have the infrastructure already built to handle data privacy and regulation, building AI on top of a structure that doesn't have those considerations taken into place is really hard and often disastrous. I've seen situations where with CCPA, where California residents have the right to opt out of automated decision-making, if we build AI on top of our data platform, but we don't have some kind of mechanism to opt these folks out, which is their right, it's incredibly hard to go back and fix that on the back end.
So you've already trained the models and they've already sucked up the data. You're in the board. Okay, exactly. So business drivers 1 and 2, build AI, and 2, make sure you're in compliance, particularly with all these compliance and privacy and regulation things that are driving that. Roy, what would you add from a business point of view? What do you see?
Yeah, so I think you touch on two really big ones. I think AI, I would almost kind of categorize. So I would categorize it in 2 ways. I think the first one is FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And I think that's one of the main drivers for AI, not necessarily that you have a use case or you know what to do with it, but everybody else is doing it. I got to do it too, or I'm going to get left behind. The other one is typically categorized as business value, but that's super generic way of talking about it. When I talk to our customers, and even in my previous role, majority of the business driver was around how do I deliver more innovative features and capabilities to my customers, because ultimately that's how I'm going to compete in the market. Now, whether I'm doing analytics for my marketing team so they can create better campaigns, they can reach new customer bases, or if I'm doing analytics for my product teams so I can understand who is using the product, how they're using it, what features work, what features don't work. That's just a broad spectrum of things that you can do with analytics. AI kind of helps us look around corners and currently with LLMs and Gen AI is just like kind of look around corners, unearth things that maybe we didn't think about, that maybe the machine can kind of collaborate or kind of put a lot of information together and produce some insights that we didn't really think about. But in essence, it really boils down to either everybody else is doing it and I need to do it too, or I have a true business advantage that I want to capitalize on and I need to be able to use data and ML in some way to be able to leapfrog my competition or build a new feature or something like that. But most of the data work I've seen was really around driving innovation within the company and across multiple aspects of the company.
Thank you. John, what would you add?
I'm going to throw into the mix real-time or near-time, just-in-time scenarios in the business, along with the need for better productivity. Productivity is down over a 50-year period in most nations. And every company that I know today is trying to do more with less. And they need to respond faster. And so the combination, that's like the perfect storm right there in terms of completely stressing out old architectures that were designed for, data kind of moving left to right from a source to a target to a data warehouse and then analyzing it and trying to run AI, and it doesn't work. And real-time used to be a niche. If you go back 5 years, 10 years ago, real-time was niche, but it's mainstream today because everything has become digital. So whether you're doing supply chain or retail or engaging customers or running projects, whatever you're doing, there are real-time elements, and there's not enough people to be able to respond in real time with an intelligent response, especially as those transactions multiply and grow. So I'm going to say this combination of real time, near time, just in time, and the need for businesses to create more productivity within their workforce.
So getting last night's reports, discussing them in this morning's meeting, figuring out what to do and implementing it next week doesn't work?
No, the customer is gone, right? If you're trying to acquire a new customer, or you're trying to retain an existing customer, especially, the opportunity's gone. It's disappeared. If it's a supply chain, right, and there's goods that you need and they're available, you have to be able to act now with the optimal, optimal recommendation for a price to offer for those goods to get them at that moment so you can get them in time to be able to build something. It's everything is moving to real time.
Yeah. I think I would just add one thing is that, typically when you talk about real time and near time, and I 100% agree with everything you said, usually when you talk about these things, folks think about it in the context of analytics, in the context of BI, right? Like, oh, I don't need my dashboards to update every second. Every hour is fine for me. But real time, near real time isn't for BI. It's not really for analytics. It's more for machine to machine, right? As you were just describing, John, like if I have supply chain or, somebody's doing something, I want to offer them something different. Like there's no human in the loop in that, right? So if you look at all the new startups or even the older startups that are coming in, the advantage is offering users value faster, right? As opposed to, oh, I just got an email yesterday or 2 days ago of a promo, but I already passed my buying period, right? So I agree with you 100%, John, that near real time is really a big differentiator. And I think that you're starting to see the adoptions. More and more people are getting it now. You're seeing the tooling becoming better. Like one thing that we do at Upsolver is that we combine batch and streaming together, and it's all presented to the engineer, to the user in SQL, right? So you don't really have to know the differences between them. But in the industry, people are still like, whoa, batch streaming. at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? Like Spark and Flink and Absolver and Decodable and a bunch of others already bundling all that stuff into a single user interface that makes it a ton easier for people to embed, and that hopefully, in my opinion, will accelerate the adoption of real time that John's talking about.
Got it. When we talk about time, and Andrew, I want to explore this with you. When we talk about time, what we just discussed is a lot of, the automated real time. So the computer does this happens, this automatically happens, this happens. But another aspect of responding faster is time to solution. So you get a new requirement, the old waterfall development cycle, or trying to make an architecture be responsive. Do you have a point of view on that version of respond faster?
Yeah, absolutely. As Roy was talking, it reminded me of the importance of data product management, and the use cases should really be headed off by a strong product management process, which is new to a lot of legacy teams where they didn't have a product management process, right? Like they were taking in requirements, it went straight to engineering, and then they built it out. But now there needs to be somebody who's watching the overall process, deciding what use cases need what type of implementation. And that product management is so critical. And it's hard for a lot of organizations who, for a long time, were moving towards more federated, decentralized teams with this data mesh concept. And now with AI, I'm seeing a lot of those organizations go back to more of a strong centralized process because they want data governance that kind of fell through the cracks in a lot of those processes. And strong product management needs to be a part, regardless of if it's federated or centralized, so that as those requirements come in, time to solution can be super fast, but also the right solution at the right time.
Yeah.
Roy talked about innovative features, to customers, but you described internal customers, the BI teams or this or that. But as you start to talk about data product management, your data could be an external product as well. Is that track? I'm getting head nods. So is that also a requirement that the architectures now need to be able to support, because there may be this business opportunity to monetize your data?
Yeah, I think especially as companies begin to implement generative AI and more AI agents, artificial intelligence, the opportunity to then offer data services to their customers, it grows, it's incrementally bigger. There's more opportunities. And I just spoke with a product manufacturing company, for example, that has office products that they make, and they basically put into their whole mix an organization that is looking at nothing but data services. Well, they build printers and they build computers and things like that, but they're looking at, well, what data are we collecting and how can we potentially offer that as a service? So suddenly they're going from a manufacturing and an office product company to a data services company. And it's because of AI capabilities and generative AI capabilities that they're moving that direction. So it has to be a part of the architectural consideration. What data do I have and what analytics can I offer as services to my clients along with whatever else I'm doing?
Well, this is a lot of requirements. This is a lot, and they all sounded pretty essential to me. And I'm sure as the listeners are going through that, and yeah, we got that problem, we got that challenge, we have this opportunity. Let's switch gears. Let's go into engineering marble mode. What kind of analytics AI architectures are out there to do these things well? What kinds of things are you seeing? Let's focus there, and let's start with you, Roy. Can you take that? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, generally speaking, I mean, there's it's a broad topic. I think the thing that, at least for me, that I've seen successful is just starting from a base of really understanding what kind of like what tooling do I have, what skill sets do I have inside of my organization to be able to understand what can I deliver and what do I need help delivering, right? I often see companies kind of like jump ahead and start building like the cool tech or the cool architecture or what everybody is saying on LinkedIn should be the next architecture, and they kind of get into trouble, right? What I've seen in the market is, to simplify it, right? Two kind of main categories. The first one is or of architectures. The first one is a vertically integrated type of solution: Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, whatever that may be. And then a more of a kind of like build your own architecture that may be, building blocks from AWS or some managed services, some vendors, but ultimately you're kind of building a more flexible architecture. The vertical integrated ones tend to be very easy to get started. They do tend to be more expensive over time. And the other aspect there too is that you don't necessarily control the roadmap and your abilities to deliver additional value or capabilities if your needs kind of deviate away from that particular vendor's capabilities. And we see this now a lot with, the Snowflakes of the world and Databricks and BigQuery and Redshift, where they're saying, but we can do LLMs, we can do Gen AI, we can do all this AI stuff that everybody's talking about. Just bring your data into our platform. Well, you can kind of do it, right? You give me some canned models or some canned options. I call it AI in a can, right? you basically, you get what I give you, and if I don't have all the other options, well, sucks for you, right? Deliver just an answer, a Q&A service. That's all you can do, right? Or some other LLM-based stuff. So if your use case is that narrow and confined, then you can build in an environment. But very quickly, I see companies sort of migrate away from that, first because of cost, second of all because of limitations and restrictions, into a more of a build your own architecture, typically a lakehouse, Dremio on top, some other open AI applications, a bunch of other flexibility that now you can move around. If I want to take a model from AWS or a model from Google or a model from Meta, I can just stick it all together. If I want to go on a bleeding edge and go pull the next best thing that just got announced, I can bring it in very, very quickly. But it does require more engineering, more skill set, like I said before. So if you have the team and the ability, that's the best way to do it. If you don't, and you don't have the engineering teams, then vertically integrated is the easiest way to get started. And eventually you can migrate some of those workloads off to a self-managed environment.
So is that the kinds of things you're seeing at Dremio, Andrew?
Absolutely. We see that often the simplest models tend to work the best, the simplest designs, and the flexibility there. We see that there are, as Roy noted, there's large vendors who can be kind of all-in-one solutions, but perhaps you have vendor lock-in, and as long as it aligns with your use case, that's okay. But if your use case veers away from what you're locked into, then you have issues. Then there's open source and a lot of flexibility there. And you just have to avoid the temptation to build a Lego model where you continually just keep adding bricks and never take anything away. So making sure that you can scale both vertically, as Roy noted, and horizontally with that flexibility, but focus specifically on what use cases and what business value are you specifically trying to drive.
And do you agree with that? Start with an inventory that Roy was talking about. Have a good understanding of your existing capabilities.
I think you have to. In order to scale or use things effectively, you have to know what's already there. And beginning with the inventory is often hard for teams. They need to do that spike in the process of figuring out where they are and make a plan around that, rather than putting fingers to keyboards right away and just start building something.
Yeah, it is kind of boring to get the spreadsheets out and start figuring out what you really have. John, what are your thoughts on what makes a good architecture these days?
I'm going to go back to your idea of engineering marvels, because the real engineering marvels that I'm seeing today are platforms that are abstracting away the complexity. Because because the people, the end users, customers that I'm talking to, they don't want to be software engineering firms. They don't want to be putting all of the pieces together. And yes, it gives you more flexibility, but the modern marvels of software engineering are these companies that are looking at multimodal products, right? Multimodal databases, one platform where you can store the data and do many different things. Multimodal data engineering platforms where you can unify the data engineering functions on a single platform, so that you're actually reducing the number of moving parts. That's the direction. And of course, there are thousands of software engineers out there and data engineers that want to keep it complex. Even in the selection of cloud vendors, when you look at the big cloud vendors that are out there, they've got a little bit of everything. But I'm just going to go on a limb and say, you look at something like AWS, and you really need to have either one or two of their products that you use, or you have to have a PhD in engineering to be able to understand how to use AWS. Google and Microsoft are moving towards more simplification of the way that they're doing it, so they could bring that in. And then there's a whole bunch of companies that are even addressing tools that are multimodal and unified data engineering platforms, including data storage, and they're doing it for the mid-market and departments. So I think the real engineering marvel of today are these platforms that are abstracting away the complexity. And I encourage people all the time, when you go out and start looking at vendors, look at the vendors who have simplified, not who have made it more complex. If they're asking you to put 10 pieces together, the answer is no. Don't do it, because it's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's been the focus for Absolver as well, is really break down the complexities of the open source tooling like Spark and Flink and all these things into a much more abstracted, unified and simple architecture. I will add that works really well. But you do get to a point where the organization's the organization's ability to sort of use data kind of like gets to a breaking point where now you've developed enough capacity inside your company and your needs are starting to expand beyond what the particular tool can do for you. And that's where I believe you need to start branching out and say, okay, maybe these building blocks are actually okay for me because I have the skills to do it and I have the people to do it. I have a team to go do this. And that's going to give me a ton of flexibility. And I agree 100% with John that large majority of the companies are not there, right? This is Airbnbs, this is the Ubers, this is the Netflix. Like, these are the big ones, right? But when I worked a lot with enterprises in AWS in particular, they tend to jump to the building blocks very, very quickly. And then we have to bring them back to the managed services because you can't build this stuff. Like, you can't build and manage it. You just don't have the people. You can go hire them. It's going to take a long time, but you just can't do it yet. But then we kind of hit a maturity point where that customer has actually started hiring those people and became better and better, actually better than us at managing this stuff. And then they decided, like, okay, we're going to move away from these managed services and we're going to build it on our own, right? And, I worked with a particular customer, I can't name names, that was doing, running, 4,000 EMR clusters per day, right? EMR using Spark, right? Like, EMR is great, but they managed everything on their own, right? They just use it as a way to launch the clusters, right? So at that scale, you're going to have to do it. Like, there's really not a lot of abstraction that can help you at that scale, but not many people are there.
Andrew, when it comes to abstraction, Dremio is one of the things that come to mind. So tell me, what do you think about when John talks about abstraction? Well, what does that really mean in real life for with the things you see every day with your clients?
Yeah, I completely agree that abstraction is an incredible benefit, and we're seeing it more and more with new capabilities. And with abstraction, I find that with the less mature data teams, that abstraction is super helpful. And one pitfall that they can fall into is relying on the abstraction and not investigating the underlying mechanisms. Somebody has to have some kind of idea of what's going on underneath. while the abstraction really enables more of the lay folks to execute tasks that they wouldn't have been able to do before. But abstraction is a key to scale, but it just doesn't remove the responsibility to understand what's going on underneath. And with the rise of the ability of a lot of FinOps teams to get that transparency into what things cost, that's being more and more scrutinized as to, hey, what's going on here? Why is it doing this? And if you don't really understand, or you don't have somebody on the team that really understands it, it can be a difficult conversation.
Well, one final thing in this area, because we're talking about this build your own versus vertically integrated, degree of abstraction. How do we simplify? Where do we simplify? And where do we hand build? Is this just another one of those 80/20s? Are we trying to get most of the capabilities to most of the people and do that in the easiest and most abstracted way, and then only do super engineering on really unique and differentiating problems? Is that are we watching that same movie here?
Yeah, I don't know if the 80/20 seems to work everywhere, right? So I'm not going to say no, but I do think that they're one of my pet peeves about a lot of the vertical application vendors is that people end up buying a product and they only use 50 or 60% of the functionality that they're paying for anyway. So another modern marvel is being able to not just pay as you go, but pay for what you use. So I think smart vendors right now are moving towards that sense where, okay, I have 500 capabilities in my product, but not only do you pay for the time that you use, you pay for the features that you use in the time that you use them. So it's a pay for what you use and for the time that you use it. And that way you're not getting charged for these, for the 500 pieces of capability that somebody's built into a product so that they can have a 10.0 and a 20.0 version of their product that nobody uses and nobody needs.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. And if you prefer to listen, please rate and review the Insight Jam podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the show.
Well, let's jump from marbles to the disasters. What kinds of things have you seen as disasters in architectures when people are trying to do AI and analytics? And, how can the folks on this call use those other people's problems to learn and avoid those problems and do better themselves? John, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm going to state the obvious, I think, but it's data quality. Your analytics and your AI and your generative AI are only as good as the quality of the data. And so it's still, the good news is it's being automated more and more, and there's more artificial intelligence being applied to the data cleansing. It's one of the first areas where there was automation in AI, but it's continuing to grow. It's getting smarter. I think that there's an opportunity connected with data quality. If you don't do the data quality, there's a second mistake that people are making, and that's not capturing the metadata and just putting the pieces together, but really capturing a metadata. My belief is that he who has the best metadata in the end is going to be the winner. I am a big fan of metadata. And so if you're building without a core and shareable and active use of metadata at the core of that, those are two big mistakes. Not cleansing the data and not collecting the metadata that drives governance and usability.
We didn't want to hear those. Those are boring.
Yeah, it's the same old, isn't it? I'm sorry.
You can go away from that.
Go ahead.
I think a slightly different angle. I mean, kind of on the lines of quality. What I've seen, and this applies to AI and ML, is that we tend to get excited by the cool stuff, by the new stuff, by the shiny objects. There's a ton of open source projects out there that do a million different really, really awesome things. And I'm by no means discouraging open source. I'm a huge fan. I think the challenge that I've seen a lot is that open source is attractive because it says, oh, I can do this cool thing. And it's really easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's easier to get started and kind of build demos with this. And then being able to kind of cross the chasm between demos and POCs and something that works well on my machine to a production grade service that you can then deliver to your business, to your customers, manage it, govern it, secure it, all those kind of things. I've seen countless of projects fail because they're unable to cross that chasm from some engineer did an amazing job on the local machine to do a demo, but then couldn't carry it over, right? Because they just didn't have the capacity, didn't have the people. There was just one engineer now is responsible for manage this thing at scale. There were no managed services around to deliver this capability, right? So what is the customer supposed to do, right? They're trying to hire people, don't have experience in that new tech because it's bleeding edge, right? So those projects tend to kind of die. So, a lot of things can go wrong. That's one thing that I've seen really fail. So my advice has always been, if you're going to go the open source route, bleeding edge is awesome, but kind of work back a little bit and see like who is delivering this project, who's responsible for it. Is there a comparable product in a managed service, whether to AWS or Azure or some other vendor like Databricks, right? See if there's something there that you can then later take that code over to a managed service that will help you scale it. Are there other people who have written about or talked about taking that technology and scaling it and managing it? And that's always, for me, it's been successful at just creating a light bridge between those two worlds that makes it easier for people to transition from POCs to actually delivering value to the business.
That's great advice. Andrew, what do you think in disasters to avoid?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. And I think losing that overall system design perspective is really easy if you have federated teams and if you have silos. So if you're building in isolation and then you realize, oh, these 5 lines of business have built their own systems in isolation. Now they don't talk to each other. They don't have the same semantics. There's difficult access patterns. Now we've got a problem because we lost that overall system design. So I think having some kind of product process, looking at the life cycle of the system and figuring out like, why are we doing it this way? If we build this capability, who else does that impact? How could everything talk together? I think that's really important, and it's too easy to just build in isolation.
Got it. So enable that collaboration and that higher degree of analysis and consequential, looking for the consequences.
Yeah. One other quick comment. Brian Green on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of his. Platform engineer for a long time, but he's always been preaching, do your homework before you build, right? Design your architecture, connect draw the lines, connect the dots, do your homework, really understand what it is you're building. How is it going to look like day one? What is it going to look like in 6 months, in a year from now? And really do that work. Like, don't skip over it. Don't just bypass, fine, I'll get to it later. Like, no, you won't get to it later. And if you get to that problem later, it's going to be very, very hard for you to fix. And we see this a lot with scale and performance, which is, we don't have a scale problem right now. But when you get to the scale problem, fixing it is extremely hard and very, very expensive. So Brian Green's comment, do your homework in advance, design your architecture, and then move forward.
Great. Well, that's a lot of things to do right and a lot of things to avoid, not to do wrong. Let's talk about the tools and innovative software and the kinds of things that firms are now providing to make it easier to achieve the goodness and make it easier to avoid the mistakes and the disasters. So, John, you say you spend a lot of time talking to vendors, helping clients end user companies match up with vendors. You're an analyst, you see vendors all the time. So what are some of the innovations that have impressed you in this domain?
Yeah, I would say that there's so much hype right now around generative AI, and there's a number of vendors that have literally just tacked generative AI onto their existing applications, and they're failing. But they still have the hype, and they can show a great demo. The leaders in this space right now are the ones that they have generative AI, but they're building on it on a solid architecture within their platform. And that architecture includes AI enablement that has already been there, because generative AI for a data application is only as good as its ability to interact with other AI capabilities, recommendation engines, predictions, automations that already exist within the platform. The leaders are connecting the generative AI to a rich set of active metadata, so what they're producing and giving a client is accurate and useful. A lot of them have benchmarking data, so they've been doing what they've been doing in their application for a number of years, and they have literally thousands of customers and they have the unidentified data that is the de-identified data that sits underneath it, so that they can create benchmarks and use the AI and the Gen AI against that. There's typically, as you get closer to the business, semantic layers, right? It's important to have a semantic layer so that the Gen AI is looking at that. So when you have all of those things underneath, then you have the most powerful and the most innovative and the best use of new technologies like generative AI. So what I would say to people out there looking at the vendor community, trying to decide based on AI and Gen AI who to do business with, don't get fooled by somebody who just tacked on Gen AI and says they're doing things. Same with some of the new Gen AI vendors. Gen AI on BI, and they started 6 months ago. You got to look underneath the covers to see what's actually there, because it's just cool Gen AI stuff so you really do have to look underneath the covers to figure out the real levels of innovation.
And that innovation, it sounds like what you're talking about goes back to what we were talking about earlier, was to have the solid foundation from which you can create new apps. And also what we've talked about here is a certain amount of time to build is one thing, and doing that in a more integrated fashion, but then the life cycle of managing something that's not rickety, and that, because everything continues to evolve. So that active metadata, the quality, the benchmarking, all of that semantic layer, all kind of the investments continue to be valuable. That's really cool. Andrew, what would you add in terms of innovations you're seeing that are helping people build better architectures, technologies, capabilities?
Of course, I love the lake house. I don't think it's ever been easier to get a true 360 of your customer. For decades, we've been trying to create a true customer 360. But data lived on premises, some in the cloud. Maybe we had a machine learning model trying to do predictive attributes for the customer, and we could never really pull it all together. It was like a 180. But now with the ability with Apache Iceberg and lakehouses like Dremio to bring all your data to one place, we can really get a true 360 of a customer. And it's never been easier, and I'm really excited about that.
Okay. And what would be 3 or 4 elements of a data lakehouse technology that differentiate it from a data lake or a data warehouse? What are some of the things that kind of have been the innovations that make that work better?
One of the benefits is that you've reduced the number of ETL jobs. When you move from, let's say you're using S3 for storage, in a traditional data warehouse model, you're not doing your analytics on S3. You need to do an ETL job into S3. Now you need to do an ETL job into Snowflake or Databricks, wherever your data warehouse is. And then maybe you need to do another job on top of that to get into Tableau, Power BI, something like that. And you're making copies along the way. This could lead to data quality issues because you're duplicating the data. It could lead to problems because as engineers, we know that every day you're getting some kind of pager call with this pipeline didn't go through, something didn't refresh. So it can lead to complexity and issues and cost. With a data lake, you can do your work right on top of, in this example, S3. So you get the benefit of having that robust data warehouse capability of organization, maybe a silver or maybe gold layer of data right there. But you eliminate the number of processing jobs and numbers of copies of your data. So it's incredibly efficient to do a data lakehouse. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Got it. Roy, what's your thinking here? Innovations and what do you see?
Yeah, so I want to expand a little bit on what Andrew is saying because lakehouses is a really big deal. Traditionally we kind of been talking about it as this replacement for data lakes. The way I see it, again, you kind of asked the question too, like what are the technical innovations around lakehouse? And Andrew explained lakehouse. For me, the technical innovations around the whole lakehouse really boils down into three things. The first one is what I call shared storage. And whether that's on S3 or on Azure ADLS or on GCS or on-prem or whatever, right? We're seeing more and more engines in the market able to operate on these object stores in a very efficient and native way. Traditionally, it's been, dump your data out into S3 into like a folder or a hard drive, and we'll move it around. We'll do something with it. Like, no, now everything is using the object store almost like as native storage. We look at Kafka with tiered storage and all these other capabilities, ClickHouse, DuckDB, you name them, right? Every engine now is able to just use an object store S3 as a native storage. So hard drives, less needed, right? If you need some performance, you can do that. But for the most part, 80% use cases, you don't need it. Now, like Andrew said, I don't have to duplicate my data. I don't have to make copies everywhere. I don't have to re-ETL everything to move it to different engines. I do it once. I have consistent data quality and governance around that blob of data, and now every engine can read it. And the way we make that possible is through these open table formats, Apache Iceberg being one of them, that Absolver and Dremio as well are big supporters of. And that format just kind of standardizes how engines should retrieve, query, write, update, and manipulate this data in S3, which traditionally has just been, changing files, right? Now we have this standard that says, if you want to update a row, this is how you do it. If you have a lot of files, a lot of small files that are traditionally a pain to work with, here is how you improve them. Here's how you optimize them. So there's a standard way to do it. Now everybody knows how to do it. The innovation is going to come back to, well, what can you do? Like if you're going to compact files, can you sort? Can you do this? Can you do that? That's the innovation, right? But for the most part, we're starting to speak the same language, and that creates this shared storage. So I think that's a huge piece of innovation that's going to impact a lot of the things we do in analytics and AI. The other big one, I think, is catalogs. Catalogs traditionally, so there's many kinds of catalogs. I'm specifically talking about technical catalogs that are used by engines to find data, information about the data, and then be able to plan the query and to execute the query. Like those catalogs have traditionally just been Hive, right? Hive catalog has been around for 10 plus years. Glue Data Catalog basically mimicked it. Your Unity catalog sort of took a lot of the same things, but now built stuff on top of that. So now we have Unity catalog. We have Snowflake Polaris. We have a bunch of others that are starting to come out now. And why do we see this new innovation? Primarily because Apache Iceberg came out and said, hey, we need a better way to manage metadata for these dynamic tables. And we need a better way to communicate between engines. One is writing, one is reading. Multiple engines are writing. How do we communicate between them so there's no conflicts? We do it within a transaction, so we have consistency and reliability. Well, current catalogs can't do that, right? So we need a new generation of catalogs. So for me, this is really starting a whole new race and a whole new war about who is going to bring out the next big, amazing technical catalog. And that's why you see Snowflake and Databricks and Dremio with Nessie and others are really heavily investing in this catalog space. So I think that's another area of innovation that's really going to make AI, ML, analytics and all those things much more robust, lots of metadata, tight governance and security across the board, so there's no copies everywhere. And it's going to make collaboration and working with everybody just that much better.
Well, that sounds like a great recommendation as well. And so we got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to quickly do one each, give you guys a reference architecture or a best practice or some sort of jumpstart that's really going to help the listeners today. John, do you have a best practice or a reference architecture that you could kind of recommend?
Yeah, I hope I don't get in trouble with you for this, but I'm going to recommend that people really start thinking about agentic architectures, because I think that's where everything is going. And so look at an architecture that is going to facilitate the ability of not just generative AI and analytics, but something that is going to be able to enable AI agents. And AI agent is basically an agent that is able to reason, it's able to adapt, it's able to act, it's able to interact, and it's able to react, right? And we are very quickly moving to this. I think within 6 months we're going to be talking about that. So as you're putting together your analytics architecture and as you're thinking about modernization, I absolutely support, everything, especially that you just said, Roy, about the separation, of storage and the store once possibilities, and then the compute being separate, and the importance of the catalog, all of that I think is absolutely brilliant. But I think this is a time for the leaders and innovators to be thinking about agentic architectures as well.
Got it. Andrew, best practice, besides, I'll tee up, data lake, do that, data lakehouse, do that. What else do you got in the bag that really works?
Yeah, I think elastic architectures and using companies like Elasticsearch who focus on graph databases, examples like that where it really is customizable and flexible. I think flexibility is going to be a key going forward, especially for building out AI systems. AI is moving so rapidly, so being able to keep up is really going to require flexibility and scalability in the architecture.
Great. And Roy, you have one best practice or idea for the audience?
Yeah, so before the one best practice, the half best practice is what I said before about shared storage. Start from shared storage, build on top. The other one is, and John brought this up earlier, is real time. Like in my opinion, and I sent this LinkedIn prediction earlier in the year, I think batch and real time is going to merge. It's going to continue to merge, and that's going to be the future. Don't be afraid of real time. Don't be afraid of batch. Don't be afraid of putting them together. The tooling is there. The tooling and the capability and the practice, the best practices are there. They're getting better, but they're there. So take the plunge, go after that. It's going to open up a whole new use cases and capabilities. Simply pick tools that can bring those two things together so you don't have two separate architectures. And then your life will be a lot easier. And when the business says, let's go faster, let's go at this, you can just turn the knob and you can go.
Wow, gentlemen. I've done a number of these jam sessions, and this is by far the best and most awesome that I've been involved in. Just great job by you guys. Thank you very much. We covered a lot. There's a lot to consider from business requirements. We've talked about marvels to emulate. We've talked about disasters to avoid, innovations to adopt, best practices, reference architectures, those sorts of things. So lots of things to help you get to your listeners today, to get to your objectives, achieve your business objectives faster. So that's fantastic. Sum up. And I also just want to thank each of you. And should the audience want to interact with you directly, what way would you like to have them reach out to you? I'll start with you, John.
LinkedIn is the best way. Let's connect and have a conversation. You can also check out ferraroconsulting.com.
Andrew, how about you?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is by far my most common platform. So there, and then you can also contact me through Dremio.
Great. Roy?
I'll say the same thing. LinkedIn, I put my the link in the chat as well. I will say visit Absolver.com and go to resources and webinars. We're doing a ton of webinars, like 2 to 3 a month. A lot about icebergs, data lakes, catalogs, just ton of like really, really useful information. In my opinion, I'm presenting many of them. So we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. So it's a great resource. And then we're putting all of that stuff on YouTube under the Absolver alias, so check it out. It's all there, bite-sized videos you can watch anytime.
Well, Andrew, I've seen a lot of content on the on YouTube from you as well. Do you have anything on that Dremio site or YouTube channel that you'd recommend for folks?
Yep, Dremio has a great YouTube channel, and right now we are doing Apache Iceberg Basics, which has been super popular. We've had thousands of people actually sign up for that. We're doing live sessions right now. And as Roy mentioned, I think we're even speaking with Roy here in a couple weeks in Seattle about Apache Iceberg. So great way to stay up to date.
And those of you who want to fly to Tuscany, John's willing to meet for dinner and drinks anytime.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining the session today. Thank you to our experts, and I look forward to being with you in a month. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today.